All right, questions from Sunday morning, July 7th. Last week with VBS, we didn't quite get them all, everything pulled together for this, so we're doing it today. We'll also answer questions from this week, July 14th, but we'll do that later in the week. So this is from July 7th's questions, and that was the message that Sunday morning on Isaiah chapter 30. One of the questions had to do with King Uzziah. Remember, we did some background work on King Uzziah. And King Uzziah, who was a very good king, he reigns for 52 years, but he, in a moment of arrogance and lack of humility, which is a warning to all leaders, all of us must continually function with humility in any leadership role, whether it's in our home as a parent or whether it's as a pastor or any government official. And in the moment of arrogance, he presumes upon his position something that's not his, something beyond what he should. And he goes into the temple and he does something that he wasn't supposed to do. And God gives him leprosy, which is a direct correspondence to the issue, because if you had leprosy, if you had skin disease, you were basically in isolation. You had to be put out of the community and you could never go in the temple again. And so the irony to this is that by going in the temple and doing that, taking on in the holy place a particular task that was not his, Uzziah in effect has himself banished permanently from the temple. Well, one of the questions is, does he continue to rule after that? And the answer is, there are many times in the Old Testament where the kings have a co-regency. And this is because things like this would happen. We see it with Uzziah, and his son Jotham takes over and co-reigns with his dad for a few years. We also see this with Hezekiah. Remember, after Hezekiah's illness, and we're going to look at this week, that's disclosed in Isaiah chapter 38, where Hezekiah prays and God restores him. But it appears as though Manasseh, Hezekiah's son, co-reigns with Hezekiah for a number of years during those last 7 years of Hezekiah's reign. And so co-regency is very common. And so what will happen is if a king is in failing health or toward the end of his life, he wants to make sure the son or the successor has a good head start. And this is very common throughout reigns throughout the world and world history, is that in the Jewish tradition, they would at times have a co-reign for a few years where the son would begin to take over responsibilities, and both would be referred to as king, but the son was really doing all the administrative work, and the dad was basically out to pasture. So, yeah, my suspicion is that Uzziah continued to be considered king, but that his son took over the administrative duties of the rulership. So Jotham taking over at that point. The second question is, Isaiah 30 admonishes admonition about Egypt and about Judah turning to Egypt as help. This person is wondering, is this an admonishing of American conservative Christians relying on legislators to push their agenda? Let me just say on this, there may be parallels to this in all sorts of life, whether you're conservative or liberal if you're a believer. Ultimately, we trust that God is sovereign. That's number one. Number two is that the most effective change in life is a change of heart, is a change to the compassionate yet holy and righteous God's priorities. And the only way that can happen is by God changing us and making us more like his son Jesus, who held to incredible standards of righteousness while also extending enormous amount of grace to people. And so what we really want is reformation of culture, not through legislative process or through some other means of edict or law, but through the change or transformation of life, which comes by sharing the love of God through his son Jesus Christ and calling people to repentance and humility before him. No moral law has ever changed the heart of man. Islam has 5 pillars, Judaism, the 10 commandments. Christianity, obviously there are aspects of legal, moral standards within Christianity. You have within Hinduism and Buddhism, the Sanskrit and things like that. But all of these things, none of them have ever reformed the heart of man. The thing that reforms heart of people, men and women, is God transforming us from the inside out. So in that regard, I would say a trust in God. There is some parallel here in that we don't trust in Egypt. We trust in God to change people. We don't trust in laws. We don't trust in rulers and legislators. Now, that being said, the Bible also says to love our neighbor, and there may be aspects of our political approach or worldview, we really feel like the most loving thing we could do for our neighbor is to try to see, even whether they're lost or saved, the most loving thing I could do for them is to try to enact laws or try to support particular political views that would be the most loving toward them. And that has a wide spectrum here. I'm not trying to tell someone what their conscience ought to be on these things. And I think most of you know I have not been politically motivated as a pastor because I feel like my primary role is that of to focus on eternal matters and to allow each individual's own conscience on how those political matters will play out. Now, with that, I think you should vote. I think you should be involved politically. I think you should have worldviews on those things as best as you understand them, and your relationship to God as a follower of Christ. It's going to be different for different people, and there's a lot of different reasons why we come to those worldviews, which is why I don't stand in the pulpit and say you ought to vote for this candidate and believe this worldview or support this political party or support a particular law. I think instead my job is to encourage us all to primarily look to God to transform people's hearts. And then all those other things are secondary or even tertiary compared to our own love for other people and God's love for them through his son Jesus Christ being primary. And so I would say, yeah, there may be some parallels there, but there's a lot of parallels to that in life, not just conservative evangelical worldviews and political processes. It could be liberal evangelical views and political processes. It could be all kinds of things. It could be Roman Catholic views or Buddhistic views, whatever the case may be. I would say that we trust in God, not in political processes. And so political processes and involvement are fine and good, just not our final ends and means by which we seek transformation. Good question. We'll see you guys this Sunday.